Hey everyone, welcome to your Aries new moon forecast, which is going to look at the first 2 weeks of April 2022. So I'm going to keep this short and snappy again. What I'm going to do is look at all the usual things to do with the moon. So, for example, the Sabian symbol, the chart, and like the lunar phase. But then I'm also going to have a look at the upcoming energies for the next 2 weeks with the cosmic calendars. So we're going to look at the main transits that are going to take place between the 1st of April and about the 14th or the 15th or so. So let's get into the forecast and see what we have to look forward to. So as always, we're talking about a new moon. And in many ways, this is a time, as always, to begin new things. We could be beginning, first of all, a new month-long cycle, because of course we are starting, a new lunar month essentially. But also there may be links between this particular new moon and the Aries full moon that we had back in late October of 2021. So around about the 21st, I think, is when we had the Aries full moon. So as we'll see later on, there are some thematic links between this particular new moon and the Aries full moon. So it may be that there's a continuation or a development of those situations. Yes, I mean, sort of take from it, what kind of resonates and leave what doesn't. But in general terms, I think what we're kind of talking about with regards to themes are things like freedom, agency, and autonomy. And I think we do need to bear in mind that although we tend to think a lot about the planet Uranus and the air signs, particularly Aquarius, as being associated with freedom, as is the case for Sagittarius. It's also a sign very much associated with freedom. That Aries is also to an extent associated with this idea of independence. It is the first sign of the zodiac, and Aries suns tend to be people who are quite autonomous in that they want to do things themselves. They want to kind of prove themselves. And, I suppose this is because they are kind of Mars ruled. That this is not really a cooperative planet. This is more of a sort of somebody who is a leader or an initiator, and who likes to sort of be on top, who likes to kind of come out on top. So they tend to be quite competitive on some level. So it's that kind of energy that we're sort of talking about, in the sense of wanting to kind of get ahead, not wanting to wait. Mars is very impatient, so wanting to kind of get on with things, to do things yourself, because you don't want to wait for, a team meeting or for everybody else to get their, kind of their shiz together before things get done. There's a real need to get things done, and on that score, applying our will or being very focused is also likely. So Aries season is a time when we tend to want to, for things to start happening. There's a sense of like, let's get focused, let's really kind of you get tunnel vision, and you want things to be achieved. So it's actually very good if you are a procrastinator by nature. It's a very good time to actually have that sort of to-do list, or that one goal that you want to achieve during this lunar month, and to really focus everything on getting that done. And I think you'll probably find that you'll be quite successful. So as I've already said, Aries is very much about taking the initiative. This is, if you think about it in terms of tarot's cards and that kind of thing, we're talking about Emperor energy. So this is really about kind of taking the initiative, bossing up. But of course, Mars can sometimes be a little bit too hasty or too pushy, and so we just need to watch that we don't try and force anything too much. Sort of in our haste, in our sort of desire to accomplish great things. But on the positive side, we are talking about Aries being a sign. It's a cardinal fire sign, so it is about being brave and having courage. Mars is of course a soldier, and of course one of the traits of a good soldier is someone that has a lot of courage and exhibits bravery. So we may see that now. I'm thinking particularly of the fact that we've still got the war going on in Ukraine, and of course Mars, the month of March is Mars ruled. That's when we kind of ingress into Aries season, and it's interesting that war has kind of been on the agenda, during March. And I think as we continue through Aries season, we may start to see. Well, I think it's been an ongoing theme about kind of bravery and courage, like fighting back or defending your corner, that kind of thing. On a personal level, it's also very good for being a bit more self-assertive. So if you tend to be somebody who is a bit of a people pleaser, or you tend to defer your needs to others, this could be a time when you can really concentrate on putting yourself first and on asserting your needs. So having the courage to actually speak up and to sort of state what you need. Equally, it can be about feeling capable, because Mars is all about doing. So this is very much a time of kind of doing rather than being. And of course, it will depend on where Aries and Mars sit in your chart as to which area of life this is likely to most sort of work for you. But we will have the cheat sheet later on that you can have a look at to see what where this particular new moon falls in your chart. So Sabian symbol is interesting, given that we were kind of talking about this idea of freedom and autonomy, because the April new moon occurs at around about the sort of 12th degree of Aries, so it's 11 something, and the Sabian symbol for this is a flock of wild geese. So this is the particular degree meaning, if you like. So I mean, it's an interesting one. If we think of geese, they do fly in formation, very often in a kind of a V formation, and that might kind of have some meaning for some people. I keep thinking about like V for victory, and obviously there's a lot of overlaps between this time period and the First and Second World War. So there might be kind of something in that, but also I think it's about attuning to planetary rhythms and about wanting to take off. Again, this idea of freedom, and I think maybe what we need to sort of discern is. We don't always need to sort of take off on our own. I mean, even though, as I say, Mars and Aries do tend to be quite individualistic, this is a flock. So we're talking about a group of people possibly wanting to take off for greener pastures. I think geese do migrate, if I'm not mistaken. So there may be something in that, kind of returning to certain feeding grounds, group activity and support. And of course, there are a couple of conferences and things going on during this period. For example, this Bitcoin Miami kind of happening. So it may have something to do with that. There's a sense of camaraderie, of kind of flying in formation or together with others. And also responses to seasonal changes. As I say, this does seem to have to do with migration. So there may be a shift happening on some level. You may be moving from one situation to another, or from one place to another, traveling, or from one job to another. There's definitely a sense of movement when we've got Mars sort of involved. So that's something to think about. I'll leave this up and you can have a look at the keywords in more detail. But let's press on with the forecast. Now, when we come to the lunar phase, which is the 5-degree sort of parameter of where this new moon takes place, we're talking about the lunar phase associated with attainment. So this is achievement on some level. So again, tapping into this energy of Mars as a doer. And, here I've got the tarot card of the Emperor kind of up, because this is one of the cards associated with the sign of Aries in the tarot trumps. The Emperor is ruled by the number 4. This is the number of the Earth and of the 4 elements. So it's very much about being here and now in the sort of 3D, and on kind of making things happen in the 3D. So it's very much, the Emperor is kind of the master of this material domain. So it is to an extent about applying one's will and achieving goals or attaining some kind of objective. And we can see it in some of the points that James Burgess raises, such as leaders must sacrifice themselves to an ideal and suffer the consequences of the imperfections. And of course, this is something that, Aries and Mars do find difficult, is to first of all admit fault, and secondly to the kind of the downside of kind of just doing something and being a little bit hasty or impetuous is that we can very often make mistakes, or we can fail to think through the consequences of our actions. So I think it's speaking to this idea of, it is important, if you are leading or initiating or kind of pioneering, so leading the way or kind of way showing, that you do also need to bear in mind that you must have some clear idea of what you are way showing for. Like, what is your ideal? What is the idea that you're kind of bowing down to and wanting to sort of like bring about in the world, but also, what happens if things go wrong, and being willing to take the responsibility, for whatever kind of happens. So having a certain degree of accountability. And then there's a lot here you can see in terms of freedom and liberation. So we've got involvements lack meaning unless they lead eventually towards spiritual liberation. So again, this idea of being free, and I think, with a flock of geese, we have this idea of being liberated from the physical body to an extent, or just being able to fly free and kind of move forward with speed. And again, we see it with the next one, where the energy flows freely, the outcome is ultimately always good. So there's a lot here about kind of letting go, letting flow, and almost, you know, if you have somebody who's got a strong, who's got strong Mars ruled chart, that kind of thing, you know, it may be a time to sort of let them fly free and do whatever it is that they need to do, and not kind of hold them back, because that can cause a lot of resentment and irritability and that kind of thing. So it may be a case that if you're more of a kind of a, you've got more feminine stuff in your chart, that it might be time to sort of allow the energy in your energetic bodies to flow freely, or indeed for somebody in your life to do what they need to do, kind of thing. So yes, I mean, interesting again with appreciation of the highest aspects of life depends on acceptance of the lowest. So yes, not judging, again allowing for everything to have its place, for people to do what they need to do, and for difference, I think, as well. I think this is the, you know, if we're thinking about Aries as being about a very individualistic energy, then part of being an individual is accepting that other people also are individuals, and that they may have their own way of doing things, and also of seeing the world, or their own values, or whatever it is. And I think it's a case of like live and let live here. And, you know, staying in your own lane, essentially. If you want to achieve something, you know, stay in your own lane and focus on that. So sanctifying ordinary things shows great personal wisdom and leads to harmony. So again, there's this idea of reverence or respect for the profane, if you like, the everyday, the ordinary. And we did get that in the last full moon forecast that I did on the full moon in Virgo, where I talked about this, the Pisces Virgo polarity, and how this is all about trying to balance the ideal with the real. And so we're continuing this theme now with this idea of sanctifying ordinary things. In other words, sort of like, there's nothing wrong with being humble. You know, I keep thinking about the Fool, for example, in the tarot, and the Fool for me really represents that sort of Aries energy of somebody who's a bit wet around the ears, but is actually a wise fool, in the sense that they have a sense of wonder about life, a kind of a childlike wonder, and they also don't necessarily they're not weighed down by fear, or they don't necessarily see the downside of taking risks. And you know, what's that saying? Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Sometimes that can be a good thing, because you have this kind of bravery, and you don't have the fear that can sometimes hold you back. So yes, I mean, some interesting things to contemplate, you know, around this particular 5-degree parameter. So again, I did promise that I'd create a cheat sheet, and this is it. This is she. This is he. So look for your rising sign, and the sun and the moon will be in that area, that life area of your chart, essentially. So if you do have Aries rising, then we are talking about the first house of self-expression, physical appearance, health, vitality, and personal disposition. So that'll be your area to kind of focus on. So I'm going to leave you to pause the video and find your particular ascendant, and I'm going to continue with the reading. Now we come to the chart, and this is an interesting one, because first of all, we've got all the planets on the eastern kind of side of the horizon. So that's quite interesting from a perspective. It's really emphasizing sunrise, it's emphasizing new beginnings, which is very much in keeping with this equinox energy that we are still in, you know, when the sun ingressed into Aries, and on sort of newness or dawn, so a kind of a new cycle starting. Over and above that, there's not a lot of aspects. We've got the sun and the moon in a kind of a stellium with, you can see here with Mercury and with Chiron and Aries. So those four kind of planets or chart points, concentrating energy in one place, and I think that fits with this idea of Mars Aries as being focused on one point. It's very much about, you know, like if you take a magnifying glass and you use it to concentrate sunlight, that it's going to sort of create this laser beam of energy that's going to really burn into like one particular position. And I think this is the way to view this 2-week period, is that it's really good for getting laser focused on achieving one particular goal. But what's also interesting is, as I say, this inclusion of Mercury, which is obviously has to do with the mind and with communication, also with travel. So again, it may be that you are traveling at this time or during this 2-week period, and but Mercury is also interesting from the alchemical point of view, in that it is considered to be androgynous, so it has this dual quality. If you think about the symbol, it's the symbol of Venus, but it's got this kind of crescent of the moon on top of its head, so similar to the crown chakra. So it could also be that you get some new ideas now, that you see things from a new perspective. You could be meeting people, or encounter new situations that really make you see things from a different perspective. There's a lot I feel about that, and with Chiron in the mix, we are talking about healing, and it's very often to do with our kind of core masculine wounds, so where we feel different, where we feel like we don't fit in, where we perhaps feel alienated on some level, where we may feel like abandoned or disowned. There's a lot in Chiron about sort of core rejection wounds. So I think a great opportunity for healing. And I'm not, it could be through doing, as I say, it could be through either a conversation that you have with somebody with that Mercury. It could be about a shift in your own perspective that allows you to sort of heal a situation. Or it could simply be through that maybe through kind of doing something, like repeating an experience, or just physically carrying it out, that you maybe you heal something that has to do with capability, or not feeling that you're able to do something, that you're able to sort of push through that resistance and actually see that you're more than kind of capable of achieving something if you put your mind to it, or if you practice enough, So those are the main themes to do with the luminaries and with this new moon. Other things to note is that Jupiter is applying to Neptune in Pisces, which it will reach kind of mid-month. But I think I'll talk about that in more detail when we get to the full moon, because it's closer to that particular lunar phase. But just something to be aware of, that Jupiter is kind of amping up the Neptune energy, and that can make us feel very emotional. It can make us feel very exposed or vulnerable. It can be difficult to sort of discern or separate our own feelings from those of others. So, in the background, don't be surprised if even if you are feeling very motivated and want to get things done, maybe career-wise, or in terms of like getting a physical fitness routine going, that kind of thing. And in the background, I think we are working through this quite oceanic energy, which can at times feel a little bit overwhelming. So just something to, just sort of to bear in mind, that there is this kind of underlying oceanic collective conscious thing going on, which is feeding into the nodes. If you look at Jupiter is making some very positive aspects to the nodes. So it could be that, that there are kind of fated events happening behind the scenes, which require you to move into that energy of letting go, letting flow. So it's interesting, I think, with the lunar phase, that there was this underlying Piscean almost theme of letting go, letting flow, along with this idea of freedom and or autonomy. So that's worth bearing in mind. And then also in terms of Venus and Mars, they've been kind of traveling quite close together with each other. Mars is obviously the ruler of Aries, so this is why I mention it. But the two are separating now. So Mars is at 19 degrees or so of Aquarius, and Venus is speeding up. So she's moved to about 25 or so, and she's kind of closer to Saturn than she is to Mars at this point. And so those energies are now making difficult aspects to the nodes. So it could be that when it comes to things like creativity and relationships, or body image, or anything to do with kind of beauty and like desire or sex, that the things crop up now that may have a kind of fated element to them, which may be you may need to work through, as a sort of a progression of those squares that Venus and Mars made to Uranus. Saturn is the planet of limitation and karma, but also of adulting, and it could be now that we are thrust into situations where we are forced to kind of grow up or burn through karma on some level, take responsibility for our actions or for decisions that we've made. So that can also feel a little bit slightly more difficult. but I think we should just kind of push through. And then the other thing to say is that this is the last lunar phase before eclipse season 2022 starts. So our first eclipse will be at the end of April. Obviously, I will be doing longer phase forecasts closer to the time. And, you know, this is going to be a blue moon. So the eclipse is going to be a new moon, I think. I think it's a solar eclipse. So it'll be the second new moon in the month. And just worth sort of bearing in mind that this is going to be quite an unusual time, this particular month, where there's going to be a lot of change, a lot of things shifting. And I think we just have to have faith that everything's going to work out for the best. And there are a lot of quite positive Jupiter aspects around, Jupiter-Venus aspects around, that should help us to sort of to keep the optimism, to keep the faith alive, type of thing. So yeah, those are the main things to just be aware of. Now I just want to return to some of the themes from October 2021, because you may find that some of these now come back again. So the main theme that I focused on back then was this idea of the two faces of Mars. You know, that Mars, we tend to forget that Mars, although it's a malefic, when it was sort of in its original form, it was seen as both Eros and Thanatos, in other words, a life force and a death force. So Mars was very much associated with the greening of plants, you know, which happened in spring. And of course, you know, Aries season is certainly associated with the beginning of spring, the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere. So although we tend to think of Mars as being this kind of this death wish, you know, the soldier, the butcher, and the villain, there was this more positive side to Mars, which I want to kind of touch on now, because I think it's important for, in terms of the healing themes, that we just remind ourselves of these things. Because back in October, a lot of the themes were more around the kind of death aspects of Mars. You know, there was a Mars-Pluto square happening at more or less the same time as the full moon. And, I mean, Mars-Pluto, you don't get more kind of death-wishy than that. You know, we're talking about both the old and the new ruler of Scorpio, the sign that's so much associated with kind of death and rebirth. And of course, those haven't gone away. You know, we are talking about war and the spectre of nuclear holocaust again with this Russia-Ukraine situation, especially with Russia kind of amping up the talk around how they are a nuclear power, and if they want to press the button or they feel like backed into a corner, they will. So I think from a kind of a mundane astrology perspective, we are kind of looking again at this period between the First and Second World Wars and being reminded of some of the themes back then that maybe we're working through now as a collective, you know, in terms of our kind of collective or social karma that are linked to that time period. So, for example, there's a lot of talk around a possible recession this year, and of course, between the Second and the First World War, after the flu pandemic, there was the 1930s Great Depression. So I think we could be sort of triggering a lot of fears around those particular issues. And of course, the other thing is that the Second World War ended with the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. So again, you know, with Russia kind of talking about you know, possibly pressing the sort of nuclear button, and a lot of people worried about what's going to happen with Chernobyl and that kind of thing, that those collective sort of fears may rise up again, and we may need to just kind of work with them in a more kind of conscious way. But on the more positive note, as I said, Mars was considered to be both the green man and this fertility god, so this god associated with crops, and as I say, particularly with green shoots and leaves. So Aries season is a time when we see a lot of kind of green shoots on trees and on plants. There's the rising of the sap in spring, which is very life affirming, and we can obviously compare it to kind of the sperm in sort of reproduction. So you know, I think it's worth trying to sort of cultivate that life-affirming energy, that life-affirming side of Mars, which is associated with physical vitality, so having a lot of energy, physical energy, fitness, with having strong muscles, with movement, you know, things that are quite healthy for us. So I think if we try to incorporate those into our life during the next 2 weeks, in a good way, I think that could be really quite beneficial and get our energies flowing, you know, and get us kind of moving again after Pisces season, which is often quite stultifying, and where we can get into a bit of a funk or sort of get into analysis paralysis or procrastinate a lot. So yes, in that sense, you know, Aries and Mars are both very much associated with freedom, movement, and agency, and also with will and survival instinct. So again, I think taking action, rather than feeling afraid of like, oh my God, is there going to be a recession? Taking action and deciding what you can do, like what's your plan B? What can you do now to sort of like store, put away some savings just in case, or what can you do to improve your earnings, or just taking action on some level so that you feel more empowered. And that's a really good way to deal with kind of worry or anxiety, is actually to take action, because that takes us out of this what if, and it moves us into I'm doing something. So we immediately start to feel more, kind of in control. So again, just as a kind of recap of what I talked about last time, I also talked about this idea of evolutionary biology and having its roots in scarcity theory, which was very prevalent in the 19th century, when there was this huge shift in terms of industry and what was kind of happening. So we're moving out of the period of bucolic kind of agricultural feudal lifestyle and into this sort of mechanistic world of machines and the Industrial Revolution. And this kind of bred this idea of kind of survival of the fittest. And I think that this is an idea that we are starting to kind of outgrow now, as Andreas Weber reminds us in this quote, that although we tend to see things in terms of like biological, technological, and social progress being driven by egos that are trying to outcompete each other, so this kind of gamification of culture and of sort of different life kind of experiences or rites of passage, that this can sometimes be counterproductive. This idea of win-lose. We kind of get into these binaries that aren't always actually that helpful. And what he's kind of saying is that it's not a case of like exploiting people so that there's like win-lose or kind of zero-sum game mentality, that it's actually better to see it in terms of cooperation and of everyone doing what they can do best, kind of coming together, rolling up our sleeves and actually doing something that is going to be constructive for everybody, So he says this metaphysics of economics and nature is far more revealing about our society's opinion about itself than it is about an objective account of the biological world. So needing to see things again in terms of like ecosystems rather than this kind of predator-prey dynamic, which is only one small aspect of nature. Yes, nature can be competitive. Yes, nature can seem cruel. And there is this kind of dieback that happens in every autumn and winter that's needed in order to sort of to keep cycles going, but there's a lot as well about cooperation and about love, and I think it's just worth trying to sort of cultivate those qualities. So here's a kind of reminder about Mars as desire and life force. A lot of these things I did talk about in that full moon forecast, so I won't get into detail, but I'll just say that according to the Orphics and the Pre-Socratics, Eros as Phanes was the god of creation who sprang to life from a cosmic egg. So it's interesting, as I said, this idea of the sperm and the egg, and that Phanes had a kind of a snake or a burus wound around him to represent time. So it kind of represents almost the turn, like the movement of the sun as it kind of does this strange kind of loop, during the course of the solstices and the equinoxes. And so being aware of time and where we are in that kind of natural cycle, which is spring, as far as Mars Aries season is concerned. So about new beginnings and of kind of taking action. But it's also about Mars as Eros, so not just a fertility god, but also the male god of desire. And of course, desire was seen as being one of the key drivers of the cosmos, that it's this energy of the masculine, the divine masculine, moving towards the feminine, being drawn towards her. She kind of magnetizes him, and he moves towards her, kind of propelled forward by desire. So it's this masculine uniting principle of love, which brought kind of an order and harmony to the cosmos. So it's a good way to sort of to see Mars and Aries now, not just as the kind of the immature baby, the sort of the man child as the sort of baby of the zodiac, but also to see it as being this wise fool, as I was saying earlier, of the tarot, where we are kind of invited to kind of skip forward in life and take a chance, take a risk, take a leap of faith, that kind of thing, and move towards what we desire. So in terms of our goals and our aspirations and that kind of thing. So again, a sort of a recap of some of the themes around kind of Eros as a catalyst for spiritual transformation. And again, this might be useful when we think about the fact that, Chiron is very much included in the mix, as is Mercury. And I mean, Mercury in alchemical terms is considered to be the planet of soul, as I say, because it is androgynous. So it's able to kind of, it's liminal, it's able to kind of, to cross dimensions, to cross, sort of ways of being or seeing, and to kind of help us to unite opposites, that kind of thing. So this is a quote from Angela Voss, who's a former kind of teacher of mine, and she talks about how in Neoplatonic and esoteric cosmology, erotic desire is considered to be a great catalyst of the soul to spiritual wisdom. So it's about far more than just the act of like sex or desire, in a physical sense. So it talks about how the sacred in our secular world is we don't think about it as being accessible through sex, but I mean, think about Tantra and what that kind of means. And so we've separated human sexuality from religious experience, but this is not really true of like the yogic and the Vedic traditions and a lot of sort of alchemical work, spiritual alchemy. And what drives it is the longing for the beloved. So she says, how then to bridge the gap? To see the world of nature and human beings as reflections of divinity, and to understand passion and longing as a movement of the soul. So this is a much higher form of kind of passion or longing, not just necessarily lust for another person, physical lust, but also about the drive of the soul, that it wants to kind of move forward towards kind of growth, and to sort of unite with things. So it says we must return to the ancient Greeks, who saw the force of erotic love and attraction as something raw and powerful, that could bring about the spiritual transformation, but that needed directing. So I think in this sense, if we think about Mars Aries as the kind of the vagabond or the rogue, in that sort of puer sense, in the geomancy, that it does need discipline and direction, and via creativity and intellectual understanding, so into a harmonious and directed desire of the soul to return home, freeing itself from the bonds of its earthly existence through creating beautiful forms. So this is the work, she says, of true imagination, and it's sort of shot through with this kind of passion of joining the sacral and the heart. So it's really interesting, and I think a lot to think about. You might want to kind of pause and think about it, but to me it fits really nicely with a lot of the poetry of Rumi, which is quite alchemical. That's why I've included this, this quote from Rumi on the side here. Yes, and also how we can direct and better focus this desire so that it doesn't become unruly and create chaos in our lives, which so often happens in romantic relationships. And maybe if we learn to channel that energy into more constructive or kind of creative pursuits, that it would better serve us. In much the same way as Tantra uses sexual energy to channel into manifestation. And interestingly, Steve Nobel has done a transmission, which I might link in the description box, where he offers a technique for how you can use sexual energy to manifest things. So yeah, it's a really interesting concept. So as I said, I'm going to get into the energies of the next 2 weeks. So from the Aries new moon on Friday the 1st of April through to the full moon in Libra, which happens on the 16th of April. So if we just quickly have a look at some of the upcoming kind of cosmic weather, we don't really have much happening on the 1st. So stick to what I said about the conjunction with Mercury and Chiron in the full moon, the new moon chart. We see the next day, though, that both Mercury and the Sun make a conjunction to Chiron. So that's an extension of that energy. And I do think this is really an opportunity to heal on some level. So memories and dreams might be kind of come up and remind us of painful experiences that coincide with events in the outside world, and we're really being urged to kind of forgive and forget here, and to sort of practice forgiveness. And I think that Jupiter's and Neptune energy can really help with that, to sort of be the bigger person, or to sort of see the lesson in something, and to try and let go. So that's going to be a big theme on Saturday the 2nd, going into Sunday the 3rd, when the Sun and Mercury kind of reach Cazimi. So that's at just after midnight, about 10 minutes past midnight BST, because we're now in British summertime. So this is the combining of the higher and the higher mind and the sort of the third eye chakra. So the kind of spiritual mind and the logical mind, if you like, the kind of conscious mind. So you might have some important breakthroughs now, or prophetic dreams, realizations, that kind of thing. Nothing happening on Monday the 4th, but on the 5th we've got Venus ingressing into Pisces, and this is of course where she's exalted, so this is fantastic energy. The moon will also be in Taurus for I think some of the day, so again this is Venus ruled, and so the two things kind of gelling quite nicely. It could be quite a nice, delicious, sensuous kind of day, or just feel very romantic or like pleasant on some level. But on the same day we also have Mars and Saturn coming together. So we've got the Mars-Saturn conjunction happening after the Venus-Saturn conjunction, which happened at the end of March. And so this is fantastic for self-discipline. This is a really, really great combination of discipline and physical endurance, or kind of go-getting energy or motivation. So we can really accomplish a lot now if we are very focused and set ourselves goals or have a list. Any delays that occur are kind of, I think, asking us to slow down, or just to sort of make sure that we're doing something properly to review risks. So all in all, I mean, sometimes that can feel a little bit frustrating because, you know, with conjunctions the energy is neutral. But on the whole, I think this could be a really positive time when we can get a lot done, particularly in terms of like work and career. But equally, it could be fantastic for like a physical workout, you know, pushing through a physical boundary, lifting more weights, for example, or running sort of a better time, that kind of thing. And then on the 7th, which is a Thursday, Mercury makes a sextile to Saturn. Again, great for anything that you want to achieve when it comes to rational or logical thinking. It's fantastic for focus and concentration. We can make really, really good, cogent, rational arguments now if you need to sort of debate something or refute something, or, you know, kind of go to a conference, that kind of thing. It's also great for serious communication, and for, if you're spending time on your own, I think it can be quite nice. You tend to sort of feel quite stimulated if you do things that are you know, very intellectual, so reading or listening to a podcast or something like that. And then on Friday we've got a sextile between Mercury and Mars happening, so you could almost see these three sort of transits as being connected, this Mars-Saturn conjunction, and then the Mercury-Saturn sextile followed by the sextile to Mars, because the two are traveling in close proximity to each other. So this is a great combination of the mind, the body, or kind of physical energy, and then the sort of the higher mind, or the more disciplined part of us, the kind of adult, if you like, the inner parent. So putting those three things together, and I think you're going to really achieve quite a lot during this particular working week. The following week things get a little bit more tricky. Mercury makes a square to Pluto, so this can be quite tricky energy. It can sometimes lead to mental intensity. We can sort of brood about something, or, you know, that sort of circular thinking where we kind of we work ourselves up, or we kind of start ranting, where we feel a little bit agitated, or where we engage in passive aggressive behavior with others, you know, like we get into arguments, or try to sort of like convince someone of something in a way that they might feel a little bit strong-armed, or kind of like you're trying to force a point too much. And it can also sometimes be a time when we feel a little bit paranoid, or we feel manipulated, or we feel the urge or the temptation to sort of want to manipulate a situation, perhaps put something in a certain way in the public domain that you know, is like a cover for sneaky behavior, or is an excuse for maybe something that was a little bit shady, or it's not entirely great energy. I mean, it's good for strategizing, but generally speaking, I would avoid talking a whole lot, because it can get you into trouble. You can end up in sort of hot water. I mean, the next day things change totally. So on the 11th, Mercury ingresses into Taurus, which is a lot more settled and grounded energy. So this is, I think, good for the start of the working week, and our mind will move into much more stable, sensible energy, where we focus more on getting tangible results, and sort of approaching something in a kind of step by step, like an incremental way. So yes, I consider that to be quite positive. And then on the 12th is this beautiful energy between Jupiter and Neptune. So quite a rare transit between these two outer planets. It's a time when intuition, I think, can be really, really heightened, and we can potentially have like peak spiritual experiences or creative experiences. So this is where inspiration of the spiritual and creative kind can kind of come together, and we can have these, these kind of higher, these heightened peak experiences that involve the sort of the imagination that Henry Corbin talks about, of the kind of the imaginal realm, which is actually the realm of archetypes and where we can encounter like gods and angels and that kind of thing. So it's a different dimension essentially, and I think that we can really have some powerful realizations. We can also sort of have feelings of kind of cosmic consciousness where we feel very attached and connected to everything else, so our boundaries can kind of disintegrate. We can have these peak spiritual realizations or epiphanies. But as I said, it's also just good to realize that that if we've got Neptune in a difficult sort of part of our chart, or maybe that's difficult, that's aspected quite negatively, that it's important to have good boundaries. Otherwise, this energy could become a little bit overwhelming. So just sort of worth bearing in mind that it is important to practice spiritual protection and to also to have good psychological boundaries, during this period. The next day, we move into, again, a lot more constructive, down-to-earth energy with the Sun and Saturn making a sextile. So this is the 13th, Wednesday the 13th. So again, great for accomplishing things. It's also good for any kind of leadership, because we tend to be quite sensible and modest and grounded, and to be sort of quite self-disciplined, but at the same time we have the confidence, the Sun giving us the self-confidence to accomplish something, or to assert our authority, or that kind of thing. And then we move to the 15th, where Mars ingresses into Pisces. This is a little bit more tricky. Venus is exalted in Pisces, but Mars not so happy in Pisces. So our energy can start to kind of dissipate, and we can feel a little bit drained. So that's just something you might want to sort of be aware of, is that because of the Jupiter Neptune energy on the 12th and this Mars ingress on the 15th, that this week your energies, particularly your physical energies, could feel quite draining, or you could be spending a lot of time in other dimensions, and a lot kind of going on, like in your dreams, very active dreams, that kind of thing. So don't be surprised if you feel physically tired. This might not be the week for the big workout. This is more operating or engaging the upper chakras rather than the lower three, if you like. So an interesting time, as I say, very constructive, expansive energies, where we can get a lot done, and where we can also heal with those Chiron aspects, and where we can sort of connect with all that is in a very flowing and meaningful way with the Jupiter Neptune conjunction. So lots to look forward to, I think, and I think April's going to be a very interesting month. So that's kind of it for me. As I said, I'm going to be doing eclipse forecasts closer to the full moon, as we move into the sort of the period of the waning moon cycle, and then into the blue moon at the end of April. So if you are interested in my eclipse forecasts, which are usually quite in depth, then you can sign up for one of my memberships, my paid memberships. Just go to my website, astrologysphere.com /subscribe, and you'll see the different tiers that I offer. There is a free tier as well, a basic membership, which you can use if you want to get access to my newsletter, which I do twice a month. So check that out if you're interested. It's something to look forward to. Obviously I will do more general forecasts for everybody via YouTube, but if you want the sort of zodiac sign ones, then you're going to have to sign up for those. So just something to think about and to look out for as we get towards the end of April. But anyway, I hope you found that helpful. I hope that you have a great 2 weeks, and this new moon is really sort of motivating. But yes, wishing you all the very best, and take it easy, and I'll see you again soon.